What if I told you that the walls around you, the roof above your head, and the tiles beneath your feet might be slowly killing you? What if I told you that governments and corporations knew this for decades, yet continued to profit from your suffering? This isn't science fiction. This is the story of asbestos, humanity's most trusted building material that became our deadliest enemy. Right now, as you watch this video, millions of people are unknowingly breathing in microscopic fibers that will doom them to a painful death decades from now. The truly terrifying part? Many of them live in countries where asbestos is still perfectly legal. Let me take you back to ancient Greece, where they discovered a miraculous mineral that seemed to defy the laws of nature. They called it asbestos, meaning inextinguishable, because this stone could be woven into cloth that wouldn't burn. Greek historians wrote about napkins made from this mineral that could be cleaned by throwing them directly into fire. But even the ancients noticed something disturbing. Slaves who worked with this miracle mineral developed a strange sickness. Their lungs would fail, and they would die gasping for air. Yet this warning from antiquity would be forgotten for nearly 2,000 years. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Suddenly, factories needed materials that could withstand extreme heat without catching fire. Enter asbestos, the perfect solution. It was strong as steel, flexible as fabric, and completely fireproof. By the 1900s, it was being mixed into everything: concrete, paint, brake pads, even children's toys. Companies marketed it as the magic mineral. Advertisements showed families safely surrounded by asbestos insulation, parents confidently installing asbestos tiles in their children's bedrooms. The Johns Manville Corporation became one of America's largest companies, built entirely on this single mineral. But by the 1920s, something sinister was emerging from the factories. Workers were developing a mysterious lung disease that doctors had never seen before. Their lungs were literally turning to stone, filled with microscopic fibers that their bodies couldn't expel. The medical community called it asbestosis. Here's what makes asbestos so uniquely deadly. Its fibers are unimaginably small, 200 times thinner than human hair. When you breathe them in, they lodge permanently in your lungs. Your body tries to break them down, but it can't. Instead, these fibers create constant inflammation, slowly scarring your lungs over decades. The companies knew. Internal documents, hidden for decades, reveal that asbestos manufacturers were aware of the health risks as early as the 1930s. They had their own medical studies proving the connection between asbestos exposure and lung disease. Yet they chose to suppress this information and continue production. In 1943, the Johns Manville Corporation's medical director wrote in a confidential memo, "The fibrosis of this disease is irreversible and permanent, so that eventually compensation will be paid to each of these men." They knew their workers would die, and they calculated it was cheaper to pay lawsuits than to find alternatives. The cover-up was systematic and ruthless. Companies funded biased research, bribed government officials, and launched public relations campaigns to discredit independent scientists. They even created fake grassroots organizations to spread misinformation about asbestos safety. Meanwhile, the death toll was mounting. Workers weren't just developing asbestosis, they were dying from a rare aggressive cancer called mesothelioma. This cancer attacks the lining of the lungs and abdomen, and it's almost exclusively caused by asbestos exposure. Once diagnosed, patients typically have less than a year to live. But the tragedy wasn't limited to factory workers. Wives were dying from washing their husbands' contaminated work clothes. Children were developing mesothelioma from playing in homes insulated with asbestos. Entire towns built around asbestos mines became death traps. Consider Libby, Montana, a picturesque mountain town that became America's deadliest toxic disaster. For decades, the W.R. Grace Company mined vermiculite contaminated with asbestos. The company knew the ore was lethal, yet they allowed it to be used in gardens, playgrounds, and the high school running track. Today, 1 in 10 residents of Libya has an asbestos-related disease. The most chilling part? The latency period. Asbestos-related diseases typically don't appear until 20 to 50 years after exposure. This means that someone exposed today might not develop symptoms until 2070. It's a delayed death sentence, hidden in plain sight. By the 1970s, the evidence was overwhelming. Regulatory agencies began banning asbestos in developed countries. The United States prohibited most uses in 1989, though that ban was later weakened by industry lobbying. The European Union banned it entirely in 2005. But here's the shocking truth that few people realize. Asbestos is still legal in most of the world. Countries like India, China, Russia, and Brazil continue to mine and use millions of tons annually. The same companies that were forced out of Western markets simply moved their operations to developing nations with weaker regulations. The World Health Organization estimates that 125 million people worldwide are currently exposed to asbestos in their workplaces. Every year, at least 107,000 people die from asbestos-related diseases. That's nearly 300 deaths every single day, making asbestos one of the leading occupational killers on Earth. What makes this even more tragic is that safe alternatives have existed for decades. Modern building materials can match or exceed asbestos's performance without the health risks. The only reason asbestos is still used is because it's cheaper, and human life is apparently an acceptable cost of doing business. Even in countries where asbestos is banned, the danger persists. Millions of buildings constructed before the bans still contain asbestos materials. Every renovation, every demolition, every natural disaster can release these deadly fibers back into the air. Hurricane Katrina, the 9/11 attacks, and countless other disasters have exposed thousands of people to asbestos-contaminated dust. The legal battles continue to this day. Asbestos litigation is the longest-running mass tort in U.S. history, with over 600,000 claims filed and more than $70 billion paid in settlements. Yet for every person who receives compensation, dozens more suffer in silence, their illnesses undiagnosed or misattributed to other causes. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this story is how it continues to repeat itself. The same pattern of corporate deception, regulatory capture, and public health catastrophe plays out with other toxic substances. The asbestos playbook, deny, delay, and deflect, has become the standard response to inconvenient scientific evidence. So here's the question that should keep you awake at night. If it took nearly a century to address the asbestos crisis and it's still not fully resolved, what other miracle materials are we using today that will be tomorrow's public health disasters? What's hiding in plain sight, slowly killing us while companies profit from our ignorance? The next time you see a "Do Not Disturb" sign on a building renovation, remember, it might not be protecting the worker's privacy. It might be protecting you from breathing in the legacy of humanity's most trusted killer, still lurking in the walls around us, waiting for its next victim.